Amy Chalmers. I'm the art curator, and we are in the face-to-face exhibit of art. These are all portraits from the collection here at the State Museum, and all of these portraits demonstrate a relationship between people. I want to show you a few highlights that are some of my favorites, and we'll start with this amazing piece by Tyrone Jeter. Tyrone Jeter is a retired professor from Benedict College here in Columbia. He's spent a lot of time between here and Africa. He's currently in Gambia. And this is a beautiful charcoal drawing called Justice is Blind. It's the first time that we've ever exhibited it, and it's made of bits of paper that he's sort of collaged alongside charcoal drawings of figures and faces. Through this way, this is a section that all has to do with family connection, so family ties. These are a few historic portraits by William Harrison Scarborough, who was a very prominent portrait painter in the mid-19th century. This is the Gist family, so Nathaniel and Elizabeth Gist are the two parents, and then States Rights Gist was their son, what they named their son. These are kind of what you think about when you think about portraits, maybe. Historic oil paintings that were commissioned by people who were prominent or had some wealth. But there's a number of different kinds of portraits in this exhibit, including some that are less traditional. The 5 pieces along this wall are new acquisitions from a contemporary artist called Adebunmi Godebo, and she is Nigerian-American. Although you won't see any faces or figures in these pieces, she considers them portraits because they contain the DNA of her ancestors. She uses human hair, her own hair and hair that she has gathered from others, to create ties through DNA to people that she's been able to track down through her ancestry. And she had relatives who were enslaved people on 2 plantations here in South Carolina, one on Hilton Head and one on the mainland, called True Blue Plantations. She's created paper using the 3 crops that were grown on those plantations: indigo, rice, and cotton. And she's screen printed historical records of these people, and also from the last will and testament of the plantation owner who left those enslaved people that he owned to his family. So these are really interesting, multi-layered portraits that have a lot of significance and meaning, and you know, they capture the lives and the heritage of people who lived in the mid-19th century and before that, as do the oil portraits that are on the wall next to them. Next is another portrait that is not very traditional. This is an amazing statue by an artist named Dan Robert Miller, who is native to St. Matthews, South Carolina, and it is carved from a single tree trunk, a black gum tree. And this statue captures 3 different historical figures that all have something in common. So Martin Luther King Jr., Robert F. Kennedy, and John F. Kennedy are the 3 faces portrayed on this statue. 2 are on the front and 1 is on the back. And all 3 men were active in the civil rights movement and then were assassinated. And so the artist is drawing that connection between the 3 men. And he created this piece in 1976. He was a self-taught artist who had been a truck driver. He suffered an illness and was subsequently unable to work, but began making these amazing carvings. These are just a few of the many dozens of portraits that are featured in this exhibit. And here are some that you might not necessarily think about as portraits, but this is pottery from the Catawba Indians. This is the traditional form of pottery. They make pit-fired earthenware, and this is a tradition that's been going on for thousands of years. It's the longest continuous art tradition this side of the Mississippi River. And these particular pieces are traditional forms that have chief head effigies on them. So you'll notice that each piece has 2 heads. Some of them are sort of general effigies, and some of them are in tribute to a specific person or a group of people. There are 2 beautiful pieces here that are by the potter Margaret Robbins, who is still alive. And these are for her 2 parents, so her mother and her father, who also were potters. Over on this wall, we'll see another tribute from a an artist to his mother, to one of his parents. And this is Guy Lipscomb, who was the first commissioner of the State Museum. So he's important to our museum, and it was a huge advocate for the arts, as well as an accomplished watercolor painter. This is a portrait of his mother, a very loving portrait of her watching her children in the garden hunting Easter eggs. But his mother was always encouraging of his art career and actually was an artist in her own right. So these two pieces are by his mother, Adeline Schroeder Lipscomb, when she was a design student in the 1920s at the University of South Carolina. And these are beautiful hand-painted textile studies from her time as a student. There's also one more humorous self-portrait by Guy Lipscomb here that shows a suitcase, and it's titled Self-Portrait because it was made when he was a commissioner and he was traveling a lot. So the expression living out of a suitcase hit home for him, and he created this self-portrait. So all of the work in this exhibit comes from our permanent collection. Some of it is the first time it's being exhibited, and all of the pieces, we have over 5,000 pieces of art in the collection. All of it has to do with South Carolina in some way, whether that be an artist from South Carolina, the subject matter is from South Carolina, or someone who's spent time in the state. So it's an amazing collection that spans over 500 years. And these are just a few highlights that we're really happy to be able to put on display. I love seeing these two portraits next to each other because they have a lot in common, but there are also some really important differences. They were painted within 5 years of each other. So the one here is painted in 1849, and this one, titled Father and Mother's Favorites, is from 1854. We don't know who the subjects are in this painting. We just know that there are two sisters. But these are also two sisters, and we do know who they are. These are Mary and Clara Gregg, who were two sisters. They were the daughters of William Gregg, who was a very prominent textile manufacturer, entrepreneur, and silversmith. And he commissioned this painting after this young girl here had actually passed away. So the two sisters never met each other. He had her memorialized in this portrait sitting next to her sister, who she never met. And we know that she passed away for a few reasons. One is that she's missing a shoe. So that was an indicator in the 19th century that someone had passed on. There's a few other visual clues. The carnations and roses were funerary flowers. The sunset in the background indicated that she had moved on from this life. And the laurel wreath across her wrist also indicates that. The color scheme of white, red, and black is similar in both portraits. So this is a much different style of portrait. We refer to this as a folk art portrait, which was a popular style in the 19th century that was characterized by sort of flat figures, not a lot of modeling. They're looking straight ahead, and they have kind of exaggerated features. And these girls, likely would not have been actually standing in this landscape, but the artist would have sort of created an imagined landscape behind them and painted them in maybe some likeness, but not as much as the more fine and modeled portrait to the left. There's one more piece of art that I would love to show you today. It's one of my favorites in the exhibit. It's a pretty small drawing, but it's got a lot of character and a good story. So this drawing is by Inez Nathaniel Walker. It's called Bad Girls, and she drew it in around 1972. Inez Walker was another self-taught artist. She was originally from South Carolina, but she moved north during the Great Migration to New York, where later in her life she was arrested on charges of manslaughter for killing a man who likely abused her. She spent a few years in prison, and while she was there, she began to draw prolifically. She filled dozens of sketchbooks, and eventually a woman who was bringing in art education to incarcerated people began to recognize her work as something special, began to pay her for them, and then also began to bring her colored pencils and real paper that she could draw on instead of just drawing on prison bulletins. And subsequently, she created a number of beautiful pieces like this one. She had her own very unique style that was hyper detailed. So there's amazing line work, very expressive facial features. And then of course, she loved putting lots of detail on the clothing, which you know that inmates' clothing did not actually look like this. So that was kind of a piece of artistic license because she enjoyed drawing clothing that was fun and colorful and patterned. The bad girls that she was drawing were people that she was incarcerated with who were always engaging in behaviors like smoking cigarettes. You can see the cigarettes there, gossiping, drinking, and maybe other activities that Inez was trying to avoid, but she was also processing her experience and kind of relating to these people in her own way by creating this art. Thanks so much for taking the time to join this virtual tour with me today. I hope that you'll be able to come see this exhibit in person. It's open through July. And if you have any more questions or need more information, please visit our website at scmuseum.org.